Hello everyone, thank you for joining me with this video on different types of building construction and occupancy classes. First, we will obviously be going through the types of building construction, and we will move on to occupancy. For this disclaimer, everything I will be going off of is NFPA classifications and occupancies because I'm a firefighter in the US. I'm primarily aiming this channel for US firefighters, and NFPA is who we listen to. Alright, starting off with types of buildings. Type 1 and Type 2 construction. On the left, we have our Type 1 construction. It consists of the highest level of safety in a building design recognized by NFPA. It consists of non-combustible materials, concrete, reinforced concrete, that sort of thing. And it has a protective coating on steel construction members. Think of hospitals or parking garages where if you see the steel structure of the building, it has either concrete around it or a almost textured looking fire protective coating on it. These buildings have a minimum of 3 to 4 hours fire resistance, and they can be difficult to ventilate as the roofs are often non-combustible concrete coated steel, and if they have windows, they may be single pane, non-opening, heavy-duty thick windows. On the right side of the screen, we have our limited combustible type building. The main difference between this and our Type 1 is that the structural members consist of unprotected steel. Therefore, as you can see in this image, you can see the bare metal or painted metal being the main difference, protected versus unprotected steel. These generally have half the fire resistance of our Type 1 construction, and they may have combustible features such as wood balconies and other features you wouldn't find on a Type 1 style building. Moving on to our Type 3 construction here on the left, often referred to as ordinary construction. These consist of a non-combustible exterior and main structural portion of the building, think brick, masonry, and the interiors and roofs partially or completely made out of wood. This is generally, you think of your downtown, old town USA, buildings lined up, real brick exteriors, you go in, floors are wood, walls are made out of wood. One particular point to make note, over maybe 100 years, these buildings are remodeled, repurposed. They may have drop ceilings, hidden voids that can hide fire. Now, on the right side of our screen, we have the Type 4 heavy construction, or heavy timber construction. These are main structural supports are made of large dimension lumber, 8 inches or greater. They are collapse resistant just based on the heavy duty large structural component design and consist of relatively few voids, and usually consist of a non-combustible exterior. One point to note, back in the day, like old churches and old big mills, these would be made out of real large single piece lumber. However, as buildings keep going up and large old growth trees are no longer around, they are made out of laminated lumber, which essentially is several smaller pieces of lumber that are glued together, which have, as built, have the strength and look of heavy timber, but as they burn, the glue may melt, and you may not get the fire resistance of a true old school heavy timber building, but they still fall under this classification. Finally, last but not least, this is generally considered stick frame construction. These may have a facade that look like a brick exterior or a masonry exterior. So from the street, if you didn't know, they may have the appearance of Type 3 or Type 4 or any other types of building. However, at their core, they are essentially completely made of wood, small dimensional lumber, often using trusses and prefabricated pieces that create void spaces. And lately, they may be making use of wood I-beams, which have the tendency to fail under heat and fire conditions and fail rather rapidly. Alright, moving on from the few basic types of construction, we're going to move on to NFPA recognized occupancies. And there's some pictures in here we'll look at and try and tie in our building type and look at special considerations for these occupancies. First off the bat, we have single-use classification. An assembly building is an assembly building. An educational facility is an educational facility. It meets the standards of its classification, and there, self-explanatory. On the other hand, we have our separated use occupancies. These are like your strip malls, where they consist of several buildings, or one big building with different little outlets in it. And these, each individual occupancy has to meet the requirements of its occupancy. For example, in our picture here of our generic strip mall, the pizza place on the end would have to meet the qualifications of an assembly point or a restaurant according to NFPA. The check cashing place in the middle would have to meet business requirements for occupancy. I can't really tell the sporting goods it looks like down there would have to meet the mercantile residency classification, and so on. Now, over time, businesses may come and go, and you may not 100% get the right business meeting the right occupancy according to NFPA code, but what can you do sometimes? Alright, starting off with our largest group, assembly group. This is recognized as a gathering place for 50 or more. It consists of any large public building, theaters, restaurants, stadiums, special amusement buildings, fair pavilions, churches, that kind of thing. Just a very general catch-all. A lot of people come and go, a lot of people at once. On the other hand, our next classification is businesses. These are for the transaction of business other than mercantile. Mercantile being, think of your Walmarts, your sporting goods, your places where you go buy whatever. These generally consist of office configurations. They include large areas for storage, filing cabinets, records keeping, and, as a side note, educational locations above 12th grade qualify as a business. Therefore, colleges, technical colleges aren't educational buildings, they're classified as businesses. So for this, think of your banks, your insurance agencies, that kind of thing. Here, we're going to start on the left side of the screen at the top, work our way down and then over. Looking at our theater. What kind of classification? We can't tell from this picture, but a new modern theater may be type 1 or type 2. An older downtown theater may be type 3 construction. Excuse me. Points to consider. Fire load. Maybe not a whole lot, nothing overly special, but you have potentially flammable seats made of carpeting made of plastics, high fuel load, large open spaces, a lot of air, a lot of space for a fire to get going. And you may have some restricted access with all the seating close together. Down below that we have an old style bar depending on how old this bar is. It may be, again, the type 3 ordinary construction, or maybe type 1 or type 2. We can't really tell. Appears to have a drop ceiling, a wood floor. If this is, a 1900s building, type 3. If it was designed to look like this, type 1 or type 2. Can't really tell from what we see here. However, special things to consider. Nothing too crazy, depending on if they have a kitchen in the back, food fryers, cooking oils, access, seating, tables getting in the way. Nothing too extreme. Now, on our upper right corner, we have your average technical college, community college. Appears to be, if we look at it, type 1 or type 2. We can't see structural members. It doesn't look like there's anything really combustible attached to the side, so it could go either way. Can't tell if the windows are opening or not. Special considerations. Nothing really. It's classrooms, depending on what they teach. If it's technical college, they may have classrooms for diesel technicians may have some chemicals in them, or janitorial closets, the usual. Maybe a cooking classrooms with oils and greases and stoves and natural gas stoves. Who knows? Can't tell. We haven't been through this building. However, all stuff to consider. It's stuff you would find out doing fire inspections in your area. Down below that, we have another example of a bank. This is type 1 or type 2. Again, not really able to tell. Probably leaning closer to type 1. Doesn't look like the windows are opening around the outside in the back corner. Educational occupancies. These are your standard high school, middle school, elementary school, K through 12 buildings. They're classified by having an occupancy of 6 or more, 4 or more hours a day, or over 12 hours per week. And factory occupancy, this is a catch-all for manufacturing, assembly, repair, packaging, anything along those lines. So in our upper left, we have our public school. It looks to be a newer school. Can't really tell if the windows open. They might. It's fair assumption to be, at least, it's certainly either type 1 or type 2. Not quite enough information to determine one or the other. Special considerations. Average classrooms, cafeteria, maybe gymnasium. Nothing, I think, too extreme out of the ordinary. Thus, you have to worry about, very, very young kids maybe needing special evacuation assistance. But other than that, shouldn't be too extreme. Now, in our upper right, we have a manufacturing facility. It appears to be welding. Special considerations. Welders, energized electrical equipment, different maybe cleaning chemicals for cleaning materials, the fume extractors, dust collectors, if it's a woodworking shop. Obviously with welding, hot work, sparks, fire hazards, compressed gas cylinders, the usual suspects of such a facility. Looking at the image, we can just, right around the air extractors there above the ceiling near the top of the photo, we can see looks like the structural sections of the roof. I can't tell if they're just painted or if they are got the fire resistant coating. This is either type 1 or type 2. Can't quite fully make out what it is. Might be type 1. I can't tell if that's the spray textured like fireproofing or, as I said, just painted steel. And at the bottom of our screen, another example of manufacturing. We have a chemical refinery. Now, aside from the obvious problems of chemicals and maybe gasoline and diesel and all of the fun and exciting hazardous materials and flammable materials, you have to consider heights if there's a fire at the top of one of these towers, getting access, if a ladder truck will reach, if it won't, lockout, tagout, being safe, all that interesting and fun stuff that comes along with such a business. Coming up next, we have institutional occupancies. These are your healthcare facilities. They may or may not be able to self-rescue, depending on the healthcare facility. Residential border care, limited to four or more people not related to the owner for personal care services. Detention facilities, and especially with detention facilities, they're unable to self-rescue due to it's a detention facility, jails, bars, guards, cell blocks, all the stuff you would find in a prison. Then we have the mercantile occupancy. This is for display and sale of merchandise. Your Walmarts, your downtown shopping areas, your Main Street clothing store, so forth, so on and so forth. So at the top left of our screen, we have our hospital. Now, depending on the healthcare facility, you may lock out. If it's a dialysis hospital, dialysis clinic, everyone may be able to self-rescue. If it's a hospital and you have bedridden patients, you may have to worry about getting patients out that aren't able to self-rescue. With our detention facilities, obviously, inmates, occupants may not be able to self-rescue, and you may have to, if there's a fire or you're on an EMS call, you may have to go through security and get scanned and take that extra time to get to where you need to go. On the right side of our screen, we have our mercantile occupants. Now, depending, we've all been a Walmart or Target facility, store. Depending on where a fire may be in a store, you may lock out. It may be produce department. Nothing too worrying about that. However, if it's in the back automotive area where there's oil and cleaners and tires, there may be more to worry about there if that's where the fire is located. And then rounding off this slide, we have our grocery store, which, generally speaking, same problems as the mercantile, although generally, you're not going to have to worry about, as with the other store, tires, oil, automotive, clothing, a little bit less of the high-intensity fire loads. Then coming to our storage occupancies. These are, apologies. Didn't go over the building types for these. Hospitals, usually fairly, at least new ones, type 1 with the fire resistive. Some older ones may be type 2, but hard to say without seeing inside this one, although I'd be fairly confident in saying type 1. Prisons, generally fairly easy to assume that it's type 1. I would find it difficult to believe that there'd be a type 2 construction out there, but I'm sure they're out there depending on how old the building is. But generally speaking, I would go with type 1. Our two grocery stores, these may be new construction, a type 2 with a metal frame and a nice facade. Or if it's an older store, an older downtown store, maybe type 3 with a real masonry structure or old wooden interior. Age can give us a lot. The age of a building can help determine. For example, these two, type 1 or type 2 for construction. Can't really see the interior. I'd probably be leaning on type. Tough call. I can see it going either way. I don't really see enough to be able to definitively say one way or another. On to storage occupancies. These are used for a general catch-all for just the storage of goods, vehicles, products, animals. This is your automotive garage, your hay barn we have here on the other side of the screen. Rural areas, your barn full of tractors and harvesting equipment, that sort of thing. General construction. This one on the left could be type 1 or type 2. With the vehicles and it being essentially a large garage, I'd probably be leaning more on the type 1 side, although I could also see type 2 being a possibility. And with our open shed full of hay over here, that's type 2. Bare or painted metal, you can see all the structure, metal walls and roof, it's type 2. Special hazards, depends on what they're storing. If it's full of cars and oil and plastics, or a big lumber yard, covered lumber area, that may be a bigger hazard than our big shed full of hay. It's just a pain in a long day, but it's not really a big drastic problem. Residential occupancies. These are your 1 and 2 family homes, your hotels, dormitories. Ooh, a typo over there. But for dormitories, they're more than 16 people in a building under a single management without individual cooking facilities. This is your dormitory where each room has a bed, a desk, workspace, but to cook there's common areas with kitchens, that sort of thing, showering facilities, so on and so forth. Apartment buildings, similar to the dormitories, except they're little individual buildings. They have the individual cooking areas, the individual showers and bathrooms, that sort of thing. And then lodging or boarding buildings, 16 or fewer people without individual cooking facilities. That's your, what I would term halfway houses. Your people who may be homeless or low income, just getting out of the hospital, need a place to stay. They rent a room and they cook in the communal kitchen, but they have their own, air quotes, room. So on our top left here, we got our 2-family duplex. These are type 5 construction. These are the lightweight, go up quick, stick-built homes. This has a brick facade, but it's not. That's just a coating on the outside to look nice. You can tell a giveaway is that the lower floor is the nice brick pattern, but the second story is just your vinyl siding. It's not brick all the way up. Below that, we have our nice dorm room here. Those are the type 1s or type 2s. More leaning towards type 1, especially with newer dorm rooms. I can't really tell from this picture, but certainly type 1 or type 2. On our upper right of the screen, we have our very sharp-looking new hotel. These new ones, depending how tall they are, they may in fact be a type 5, the stick construction. They may have gone up pretty quick. You drive by and it's all light timber, wood frame, trusses, that sort of thing. They are out there. Or they could be the type 1 or the type 2, the steel frame buildings. I can't tell from this image. It's starting to get up towards the size where I would doubt type 5, but it's not with... There's the possibility there. And below that, we have our apartment building. Smaller ones may be type 5 stick build again. This one is looking a little big for that. However, we can tell clearly that's not type 1 construction because it has the wooden balconies on the outside. You can see the undersides of the balconies, the wood supports, the wood railings. You're not going to see that on a type 1 building because it's a combustible object, combustible materials. So that one I'd be fairly confident locking into the type 2 construction category. Alright. Thank you for going on this, viewing this presentation on building constructions. Tried to keep it short, sweet, to the point. Trying to avoid death by PowerPoint here with you guys. I'm always open to suggestions. If I got something